Welcome to the deep dive. You send us the research, we do the heavy lifting, and bring you back the core insights. You asked for a deep dive on executive performance, starting with Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive.
Right. And that was a great place to start, but the sources you gave us, well, they ballooned way beyond just Drucker. What we ended up with is this incredible mosaic, really. Strategy, character, organization, pulled from everywhere, ancient philosophy, modern tech memoirs, you name it.
So our mission today is really sharp.
Yeah.
Pull together a tactical guide from all this diverse stuff. For anyone, really, who needs to perform better when the stakes are high and things are, unpredictable. It's less about fuzzy leadership theory and much more about the actual habits for getting the right things done consistently.
Exactly. And we really do have to start with Drucker because he gives us this essential anchor, the absolute first step for any effective decision maker, classification.
Okay, let's unpack that straight away. Because getting this wrong, Drucker says, basically guarantees a bad decision, right? No matter how smart you are later. What's the distinction he's making?
He insists before you even think about a solution, you have to decide, is this problem generic or is it truly unique? A generic situation is, well, it's something that's happened before or it's likely to happen again. It needs a rule, a policy, a standard procedure.
Like budget overruns, that kind of thing.
Perfect example. A budget overrun of, say, 15%. That's generic. There should be a standard, principle-based way to handle that every single time. You might tweak the rule over time, sure, but you don't reinvent the wheel.
Got it. So this supply chain issue that crops up every winter, generic, needs an automated or policy response. But what's a truly unique situation then?
That's the real black swan event. The genuine one-off catastrophe, maybe a global pandemic, a sudden political meltdown, something that fundamentally rewrites the rules of your environment. Drucker's warning is crystal clear. You must treat these individually.
And if you don't, if you try to apply your standard procedure to something totally unprecedented.
Disaster. The decision will be ineffective, probably expensive, maybe even make things worse. You fundamentally misread the situation.
Okay, so if maybe 90% of what crosses our desk is actually generic, needing a policy, that really reframes the executive's job, doesn't it? It's less about constant firefighting and more about building good systems, good policies for the recurring stuff, so you free up your mental bandwidth for the truly weird, unique challenges. Yeah, that's a powerful starting point.
And with that decision framework set, the sources overwhelmingly point inward next. They argue that all that external effectiveness, all the tactics, it all hinges on what we're calling the inner game, strength of character, self-mastery.
And this is where Stephen Covey's 7 Habits comes in so strongly, right? His big idea, character over technique. You just can't fake it long term.
Absolutely not. Covey's framework is simple. You can't achieve public victory, good relationships, effective teamwork, delegation without first nailing the private victory. That's the deep self-mastery part.
If you're just using tricks and techniques, the personality ethic, as he calls it.
People see through it. They sense the manipulation, the lack of authenticity, and trust. It just evaporates. It's fundamentally unsustainable.
It's like trying to look healthy with makeup instead of actually eating well and exercising. And getting there requires some maybe uncomfortable self-awareness.
Oh, definitely. Covey is really blunt about this. Growth has to start from where you genuinely are, emotionally, skill-wise, not where your ego wishes you were.
Pretending you're at level 5 when you're really at level 2.
You just can't learn. You block yourself off. Admitting ignorance, being willing to say, okay, this is where I actually am, even if it's humbling. That's the doorway to actually learning and growing.
And one of the most immediate practical ways this inner character shows up is choosing to be proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah, think about the language we often default to. Reactive language is all about shifting responsibility, isn't it? I have to do this meeting. My boss makes me so angry. It puts the control outside of you. You become a victim of your circumstances.
Whereas proactive language...
It takes ownership. I can choose a different way to handle this. I will choose this response because it aligns with my goals. It's about recognizing that space between stimulus and response and consciously choosing. That habit is inner freedom, really.
And for the ultimate test of that inner strength, we have to look at someone like Viktor Frankl. In the absolute worst conditions imaginable, the core fight was internal, wasn't it? Just holding on to self-respect.
That's the absolute peak, isn't it? Frankl saw that even when everything external is taken away, the one freedom nobody can touch is your freedom to choose your attitude, your response to those circumstances.
The tactical performance there wasn't about breaking out.
No, it was about preventing the internal collapse. Refusing to lose your sense of self, your humanity, your moral compass, resisting that slide into just becoming part of the apathetic mass, that's profound strength.
Okay, so moving from that kind of survival footing to
Yeah.
more active control, many sources talk about managing the mind itself. The Bhagavad Gita, an ancient text, tackles this head on. How difficult it is.
It absolutely acknowledges the difficulty. The mind is described as restless, turbulent, stubborn, strong, incredibly hard to curb. But it doesn't just state the problem, it offers a method. Control is possible through consistent practice and detachment, which is called vairagya.
Okay, Vairagya. Now, for our listeners, many in very secular corporate settings, how do we translate something like engaging the senses in service of consciousness or hearing about Kintan? What's the practical psychological takeaway?
That's a really important translation. The underlying mechanism in the Gita is about conscious replacement of focus. You can't just command the restless mind to be still through sheer willpower. It doesn't work. Instead, you have to actively attach it to something more compelling, something that provides a deeper satisfaction. So psychologically, this means intentionally directing your senses and intellect, maybe through intense study, deep work, focused problem solving towards an objective that brings significant intellectual or personal fulfillment, what the text calls parashonubhava.
So you achieve detachment Vairagya from the anxieties and distractions, not by suppressing them, but by finding a more meaningful anchor point.
Exactly. You replace the mental noise with a stronger, more absorbing signal. It's actually a very pragmatic technique when you strip away the specific spiritual context. Find something deeply engaging and principle-centered.
That focus on the underlying drive connects really well with Maslow's work on motivation, doesn't it? We often mistake the surface goal for the real, deeper need.
Maslow really highlights how tricky motivation can be. A conscious desire, maybe wanting that promotion, needing public recognition, even something like sexual desire might actually be a channel for a much deeper, often unconscious drive.
Like needing safety
Yeah,
or self-worth,
right.
connection.
Precisely. The desire for safety or love or belonging or even just confirming one's identity. Maslow's point is, if you want to truly understand or motivate someone, including yourself, you have to get at that fundamental underlying purpose. Just addressing the surface desire won't lead to lasting satisfaction or change.
And rounding out this inner game, we need to connect it to outward ethics, how we actually behave. Confucius gives us a clear template for authoritative conduct.
Yeah, Confucius lays out 3 really specific actionable habits. Be deferential and humble within your own household. Be respectful in your public dealings and affairs. And crucially, do your absolute utmost, the concept of zong in all your relationships. It's a whole life ethical framework.
Zong, doing your utmost. I like that.
And he gives this really interesting benchmark for integrity. He says it's actually much harder to be poor without feeling resentment or ill will towards others than it is to be wealthy without becoming arrogant. The real test of character often comes when facing hardship or failure.
That's a powerful point. And then Cicero brings in the absolute bedrock for any kind of executive dealing: justice and good faith.
For Cicero, good faith is the foundation. He defines it as steadfastness, truthfulness, reliability in your promises, your agreements, and he insists a truly good person benefits others whenever possible and harms no one unless genuinely provoked by injury. And here's the killer line for any executive: nothing unjust can ever be truly expedient or serve you well in the long run.
He uses that story of Geige's ring, doesn't he? The ring that makes you invisible, lets you do whatever you want without consequence.
Exactly. And Cicero flips it into an executive dilemma. If a good person could, just by snapping their fingers, secretly get their name written into a wealthy person's will, or maybe hide a critical flaw in a product right before a launch, would they do it?
Cicero says absolutely not.
Because what is inherently wrong, what is unbecoming, can never actually benefit you, even if you get away with it externally, because the act itself corrupts your character, your inner self. He also draws a really important line between wrongs done with premeditation, which are deeply corrosive, and those done out of sudden impulse or passion. The planned deception is far, far worse. It reveals a systemic flaw, not just a momentary lapse.
Okay, so that inner foundation character, self-awareness, ethical grounding sets us up to deal with the messy external world. Section 2 is all about strategic vision and thriving in disorder, finding habits that help us navigate complexity, starting with Nassim Taleb and this kind of wild idea: The upside of uncertainty.
Taleb's concept of anti-fragility is it's a crucial mind shift for today's world, I think. It's based on a mathematical idea, convexity, linked to something called Jensen's inequality, but practically. It means structuring things so that randomness, volatility, unexpected shocks, they might hurt you a little bit, but occasionally they can benefit you massively, disproportionately.
Okay, now the really crazy part. Taleb claims you can be, and I quote, dumb and anti-fragile and still do very well. How on earth does that work?
Yeah, it sounds nuts, right? But it works because the structure is doing the smart work, not necessarily your predictive genius. Think about the classic venture capital model.
Yeah.
They sprinkle small amounts of money across dozens, maybe hundreds of startups. Most of those bets will fail. Small, manageable losses. But the tiny handful that hit, they don't just succeed, they explode. The wins are so huge, so disproportionate, they completely dwarf all the combined losses. That's a convex payoff structure.
So the anti-fragile executive isn't trying to predict the future perfectly.
Not at all. They're focused on creating lots of low-cost opportunities, lots of experiments, maintaining options. They ensure that when the unexpected good thing happens, they're positioned to benefit massively. In that kind of setup, more uncertainty, more randomness actually makes the system perform better over time.
That structural thinking about timing and positioning leads right into the strategy of the second mover. We love to celebrate the pioneers, but tactically, maybe following is smarter.
Often, yes. The first mover breaks the ground, takes huge risks, makes the expensive mistakes, proves the market exists, often bleeds out doing it. The second or third or even fourth player comes in, learns from all those failures.
And builds something better, safer, more aligned with what the market actually learned it wanted.
Exactly. Think about the de Havilland Comet. First commercial jet, amazing achievement, but it had catastrophic design flaws, fatigue failures. Boeing watched, learned, took their time, obsessed over safety and reliability, and then dominated the market for decades. The habit here is disciplined patience, learning from the expensive lessons others paid for.
But you can't just wait passively, right? The executive needs to be constantly scanning for existential threats. Andy Grove at Intel called them 10x forces.
A 10x force is any shift, technology, regulation, competition, whatever, that makes something 10 times cheaper, 10 times faster, 10 times more impactful than came before. The microprocessor itself was one. The PC, the internet, these are game changers.
And the key executive habit Grove preached was paranoia.
Constructive paranoia, maybe. The failure to spot these 10x forces means your entire mental map of your industry, who your customers are, your competitors, your value proposition, suddenly becomes obsolete, invalidated overnight.
Grove talked specifically about the PC forcing a shift from a vertical to a horizontal industry model. That's jargon we need to unpack.
Right. So the old vertical model, think mainframe era IBM, meant one company tried to do everything. Design the chips, build the hardware, write the operating system, develop the software, sell it, service it. Total control, top to bottom.
The full stack.
Exactly. The horizontal model, enabled by things like the microprocessor, shattered that. Companies started specializing in layers. Intel did chips. Microsoft did operating systems. Others did application software, peripherals, distribution. Each focused on being best in class at one horizontal slice.
And executives who missed that shift.
They missed the new critical factors: compatibility between layers, the power of scale within a layer, the scope of the ecosystem. They were still trying to sell the whole integrated package when customers increasingly wanted to mix and match the best components. That misunderstanding, Grove argued, is how giants fall.
Wow. Okay, dealing with that level of uncertainty, those kinds of shifts, it requires some pretty cold calculations. Which brings us to the classics.
Yeah.
Machiavelli and Sun Tzu. Machiavelli's point about prudence, choosing the least dangerous path.
Yeah, because perfectly safe paths just don't exist when the stakes are high. So the smart executive isn't seeking absolute safety, which is an illusion. They're optimizing to minimize danger, choosing the course with the most manageable risks.
He also makes that stark point about glory versus empire, right?
Crucial distinction. Crimes, ruthlessness. They might win you power and empire, but they will not win you glory, respect, a lasting positive legacy. The executive has to consciously decide, am I playing the short game for power or the long game for reputation and sustainable influence? He also has that grim justification for war. Necessary wars where you literally have no other choice but to fight for survival are just wars.
And Sun Tzu. His advice for the general seems directly applicable to a CEO.
Absolutely. First, the army or the company needs to be united, animated by the same spirit. Morale and alignment are fundamental. But the absolute critical piece of guidance for any leader, sovereign, or CEO is about interference.
Don't meddle.
The general must have the military skill, and the sovereign must not interfere with tactical decisions during the battle. The leader sets the overall strategy, the objectives, the why, but the commander on the ground decides the how, the specific tactics. If central command micromanages the front lines, you lose speed, adaptability, effectiveness.
Know when to delegate and trust the expertise on the field.
Precisely. And his final rule: only fight when the position is critical. Don't waste energy and resources on battles that don't fundamentally matter to your strategic goals.
Okay, let's move it into Section 3. Designing culture and teams for performance. If getting things done relies on others, then the executive's job becomes about removing friction and enabling honesty. Pixar's lessons via Ed Catmull seem huge here.
Catmull pointed out a massive common mistake: confusing the org chart with how communication should happen. The default is often that information must flow strictly up and down the management chain.
Which creates bottlenecks, right? Especially when things are moving fast or need creativity.
Huge bottlenecks. It slows everything down, filters information, breeds misunderstanding. Catmull's solution was radical but simple. Establish a rule. Anyone should be able to talk to anyone else at any level, at any time, without fear of reprimand. Just bypass the hierarchy for the sake of information velocity.
That speed of information then enables another key habit Catmull championed: iterative trial and error, making experimentation normal, not a sign of failure.
Yes. He argued that experimentation has to be seen as productive, necessary work, not some frustrating waste of time when things don't pan out immediately. He contrasted this with the over-planner mindset.
The executive who needs the perfect, fully detailed, set-in-stone plan before anyone lifts a finger.
Right, and Catmull's warning is stark. Over-planning doesn't actually prevent failure. It often just delays it.
Makes it take longer to find out you're wrong.
Exactly. You're just as likely to be wrong, maybe even more so, because you're locked into an old plan. But you take way longer to discover it, you invest more resources, you get more psychologically attached to the failing idea. So when the failure eventually happens, it feels much more crushing.
So the smarter habit is:
embrace being wrong quickly. Treat errors not as disasters, but as vital data points. Information you needed to get closer to the right answer. Fail fast, learn, iterate. That needs to be the culture.
But for that kind of rapid iteration and learning, you need honest feedback. You need organized candor. How do you build that crucible, as Catmull calls it, that burns away bad ideas without burning the people involved?
It comes down to trust. Deep trust, and an absolute ironclad commitment. Attack the problem, attack the project, never ever attack the person. Catmull's famous Notes Day at Pixar was a masterclass in this.
Explain that.
It was a day where everyone across the board gave brutally honest feedback on films in progress. But crucially, the leadership team went first, openly sharing their own mistakes, their own vulnerabilities, modeling the behavior. That created the psychological safety for everyone else. People left feeling challenged, yes, but also unified, like, okay, we're all in this together, trying to make the best thing possible. Leadership courage enables collective candor.
That need for honest conflict connects straight to Patrick Lencioni's work on team dysfunction. His contrast between productive conflict and, well, the bad kind.
Lencioni found that the best teams, they argue. They engage in really robust, passionate ideological conflict. They debate the ideas fiercely sometimes, but because it's about the substance, they resolve things quickly, arrive at the best answer, and walk away with no resentment. They know it wasn't personal.
And the teams that avoid that open debate?
Ironically, Lencioni says they often descend into much nastier stuff. Passive aggression, back-channel gossip, personal attacks. Because the tension doesn't disappear, it just goes underground and festers. So paradoxically, embracing open, healthy conflict actually prevents the really toxic kind.
And Kim Scott's radical candor adds another layer, right? The candor needs care. The antidote to just being brutally honest, or worse, robotically professional, is caring personally.
Exactly. Radical candor isn't just about challenging directly. It requires caring personally. It means seeing your team members as whole human beings, not just job functions. Taking the time for real conversations, understanding what makes them tick, building genuine connection. You have to earn the right to challenge someone directly by first showing you actually care about them.
Brené Brown gives us a really practical tool for navigating the tension that inevitably comes up, even with candor. Addressing the stories we're making up. SFDs, she calls them. Confabulations.
Right. A confabulation is just our brain's way of filling in the gaps when we don't have all the information. Someone's quiet in a meeting, a deadline gets missed. Our minds instantly create a narrative, often the worst-case one.
They must be angry with me, or they drop the ball deliberately.
Exactly. And Brown says leaders must have the courage to surface those stories, to check them out directly. Instead of stewing and letting the assumption become reality, you say, hey, that meeting felt tense. You were pretty quiet afterwards, and the story I'm telling myself is that you felt dismissed. Is that what was going on? Can we talk about it?
That takes cuts, but it stops the toxic narrative in its tracks.
It prevents the made-up story from becoming the accepted truth. It fosters real understanding.
Okay, shifting from culture to actual management systems. Time, focus, coaching. Gavi comes back here highlighting where executives should really spend their time.
Yeah, his famous time management matrix. The sweet spot, the heart of effective management, is quadrant 2 activities that are important, but not urgent.
Like planning, relationship building, strategic thinking, learning, preventative maintenance, personal renewal.
All the stuff that builds long-term capacity and prevents future crises, but rarely screams for immediate attention. Covey argues that our inability to consistently work in quadrant 2 isn't usually about lacking scheduling skills. It's often deeper. It's about lacking a clear personal mission, a set of guiding principles that bigger yes, that gives us the strength to say no to the tyranny of the urgent.
The constant demands of quadrant 5,
Yeah.
crises in quadrant 3, interruptions that feel urgent but aren't important.
Right. Without that deep internal why, the urgent always wins.
And to bring that kind of focus to the organizational level, John Doerr champions OKR's objectives and key results.
OKRs are all about providing clarity and alignment. North Star alignment, he calls it. They force teams to articulate ambitious, specific goals, objectives, and define exactly how progress will be measured, key results. They foster transparency and accountability.
What's the tactical trap with OKRs?
Doerr warns strongly against having weak or insufficient key results. The KRs have to be truly measurable, challenging, and directly indicative of progress towards the objective. If they're just vanity metrics or easy tasks, the whole system becomes meaningless corporate theater. They need teeth.
So once the goals are clear, the executive often needs to shift from directing to coaching. Michael Bungay-Stanier offers some great tactical questions for this.
His big thing is helping managers break the habit of constantly jumping in to give advice, the advice monster, he calls it. The most powerful way to start a real coaching conversation. Just ask, what's on your mind?
Simple, but powerful. It shows trust, grants autonomy, lets them bring the real issue to the table.
Exactly. And then when the conversation inevitably drifts towards vagueness, we need to improve synergy or the market is tough, the crucial follow-up is the focus question. What's the real challenge here for you?
Bringing it back to the individual.
Yes. It connects the abstract problem back to the person you're talking to. What's their stake in it? What's their specific hurdle? That allows for relevant coaching, not generic pronouncements. It forces them and you to get specific, and it helps resist that urge to just give premature advice.
Resist the advice monster. Stay curious longer.
That's the habit. Ask more questions, give advice less often, and usually later in the conversation.
All right, our final section. The executive's authority, deployment, and legacy. How do these habits scale up? How do they play out in complex structures under pressure?
Well, in really complex, fast-changing environments, think modern warfare or disruptive markets, the key habit is structural adaptability. The military learned this the hard way fighting networked insurgents. The old, efficient, hierarchical command structure. It was too slow, too rigid.
It got outmaneuvered.
Right. They found they needed a structure that could, as one source put it, squeeze itself down, spread itself out, and ooze into any necessary shape. An adaptable network model.
The U.S. task force fighting AQI literally had to redesign the plane in mid-flight, didn't they?
Yeah.
Making fundamental changes to their own structure while actively engaged just to keep up and close the gaps the enemy was exploiting.
That adaptability principle holds even at the small unit level. Clausewitz noted that small units face different tactical choices. Dig in and defend rigidly or be aggressive, hitting flanks and rear. But he also observed something interesting. Small posts, while exposed, aren't easily wiped out. A few people can escape or adapt more easily than a large, cumbersome formation. There's an inherent resilience in decentralization.
Shifting from military adaptation to building loyalty within an organization, Xenophon's account of Cyrus the Great offers ancient wisdom that feels very modern.
Cyrus understood that real loyalty isn't built on rah-rah speeches. He thought those had only temporary effect. True, lasting allegiance came from structure and consistent fairness. He established clear laws, focused on continuous education and development, and critically consistently rewarded merit.
Like how he divided the spoils after a victory.
Exactly. Cavalry got 2 shares for every 1 share a foot soldier got. Why? Because the cavalry took greater risks, had higher expenses, horses, gear. It wasn't about equality of outcome. It was about a fair, merit-based system that reflected contribution and risk. People bought into the system because they saw it was just and recognized value appropriately. That builds deep structural loyalty, not just fleeting emotion.
Okay, let's pivot to the sometimes messier side of authority. Robert Moses in New York. His executive habits were all about controlling the narrative and, well, bending the rules.
Moses was a master of public image. He cultivated this persona of being non-political, purely efficient, just a public servant getting things done. But behind the scenes, he wielded immense political power, and tactically. He was brilliant at finding and exploiting loopholes.
Like building his parkways, using labor that wasn't supposed to build roads.
Precisely. The Civil Works Administration, CWA rules, said their labor couldn't be used for new roads, so Moses just redefined the roads. He called them park access drives, framed them legally and linguistically as merely approaches to his parks. Boom. He gets his massive parkway system built with federal money, circumventing the restriction.
And all those fancy ribbon-cutting ceremonies?
Pure theater, but brilliant tactical theater. The silver shears, the custom-built lecterns, it all reinforced the public image of the efficient builder, masking the incredible political maneuvering and rule-bending happening behind the curtain. Control the narrative, control the reality.
Choosing the right advisors is another key habit. Hobbes in Leviathan had strong views on this.
Hobbes argued a ruler needs counselors who have the least personal stake in giving bad advice. The less they stand to gain from misleading you, the better. He stressed that good counsel isn't about birthright or wealth. It comes from deep knowledge, practical experience, conversation in the field, and a track record of good judgment. And he made this great point. Studying politics, understanding human cause and effect, is actually harder than studying something precise like geometry.
And John Locke gives us foundational ideas about property and inheritance, which touch on executive responsibility too.
Locke's core idea was that property rights originate from labor working the land, mixing your effort with it. But he also emphasized the duty of parents to provide for their children, who have a natural right to inherit. And crucially, he argued a parent cannot permanently bind their children to political submission just by making a deal themselves. Any conditions of political loyalty or subjection have to be attached to the inheritance itself. The child then has a choice: accept the property with those conditions, or refuse the property and retain their full natural liberty. It's an early model of voluntary association and alignment based on clear conditions, not just inherited obligation.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the executive's legacy. What endures? John C. Maxwell has a really clear bottom line.
For Maxwell, the ultimate measure of leadership isn't your own advancement, it's how far you advance others. Are you actively serving them? Are you adding tangible value to their lives, their careers? Your legacy is measured by your positive impact on the people you lead. Are they better off because of you?
And we see concrete business results from focusing on people, specifically through recognition. Brené Brown cites some compelling data.
Yeah, recognition isn't just a nice to have, it's tactical. It directly impacts engagement and retention. The LinkedIn example is powerful. New hires who got recognized 4 or more times in their first year. Their retention rate was nearly 10 percentage points higher. Small acts of acknowledgement build connection and make people want to stay. It counteracts quiet quitting.
And one last example of strategic impact. Lou Gerstner turning IBM around. His habit was recognizing value where others missed it.
Gerstner came into IBM right when that horizontal industry shift was happening. Everyone was focused on selling components. But he realized IBM's unique strength wasn't just technology, it was integration, providing working solutions. And a key tactical move was to monetize IBM's massive portfolio of intellectual property patents, licenses.
Stuff they maybe weren't fully leveraging before.
Exactly. Assets sitting relatively dormant. By actively licensing and selling that IP, income from that source jumped from $500 million in '94 to over $1.5 billion by 2001. He found huge value by looking at existing assets through the lens of the new market reality. That's sharp executive insight.
So we started this deep dive looking for Drucker's habits, anchored by his crucial first step. Classify the problem generic or unique. But wow, we've ended up with this incredibly rich tapestry of tactical wisdom.
It really shows that true effectiveness is holistic, doesn't it? It's not just one thing. The executive getting the right things done needs that inner mastery. First, the focus, the character, the ethics from Covey, Cicero, the Gia. Then they need to position themselves and their organization strategically embracing anti-fragility like Taleb, spotting 10x forces like Grove. Then they build the culture for execution, fostering candor like Catmull, using tools like OKRs like Doer. It all has to work together.
And it underlines that the flashy, fast victories we read about, they're usually built on a foundation of slow, sometimes difficult, iterative work. Building character, reinforcing behaviors, establishing principles. That seems to be the real prerequisite.
Exactly. The high-speed execution needs the slow burn preparation. Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. We've seen that adaptability, speed, is often key in this complex world. But think about the ancient Spartans, who Thucydides described as being deliberately slow in taking any irrevocable resolve. Sometimes, maybe, slowness is the most effective strategy.
So the question for you is, when in your own life or in your work, might deliberate slowness characterized by deep preparation, careful moral consideration, thinking through principles actually be the most powerful act of leadership?
Something to chew on.
That's our deep dive completed. Until next time, keep thinking.